Some deaths are accidents. This one was a choice, 100 small choices. You arrive expecting a national park to protect you from its deadliest secrets. You expect fences where the ground can kill you, warning signs before every invisible danger, something that tells you where safety ends and where it doesn't. Instead, the landscape offers silence. Beneath your feet, the earth is only inches thick in places, hiding water hot enough to strip flesh from bone. Around the next bend, there may be no sign at all. Not because someone forgot, but because someone decided there shouldn't be one. Nature does not negotiate. It does not explain itself. It waits for ordinary people to mistake familiarity for safety. And when they do, it doesn't need to chase them. It only has to let them take one more step. These are the warnings they ignored. This is preventable. Yellowstone National Park was established in 1872, the first national park on Earth, carved out of a corner of Wyoming that early explorers described in language that sounded, at the time, like exaggeration. Boiling rivers, ground that breathed steam, mud that bubbled like something alive. It was not exaggeration. Beneath the park's forests and canyons and wide open valleys sits one of the largest volcanic systems on the continent, and above it, scattered across more than 2 million acres, lie over 10,000 hydrothermal features: geysers, hot springs, mud pots, fumaroles. Roughly half of every active geyser known to exist anywhere on the planet erupts within this single park's boundaries. Millions of people walk through this landscape every year. Most of them leave with nothing more than a photograph, a sulfur smell that lingers in their clothes for a day or two, and a story to tell. Some of them do not leave at all. This is not the story of one reckless tourist wandering somewhere they shouldn't have. It is the story of a management philosophy, one that has remained largely unchanged for decades, resting on a premise most visitors never think to question until it is far too late. The National Park Service does not believe it is possible or even desirable to warn visitors about every danger inside Yellowstone. Officials have said in internal policy and in public statements that excessive signage damages the wilderness experience, that a landscape cluttered with warning placards stops training visitors to think and starts training them to simply follow instructions until the instructions run out, that a park fenced and labeled at every hazard stops being a wilderness and starts becoming something closer to a theme park with steam vents. Here is the conflict sitting at the center of every tragedy that follows. Every visitor who enters Yellowstone carries an assumption with them, usually without ever articulating it, even to themselves. They assume that if a place were truly capable of killing them, someone in a uniform would have marked it. A sign, a fence, a rope line strung between two metal posts, something. The park operates on the opposite assumption entirely. It assumes visitors already understand, in some basic and unspoken way, that danger exists everywhere beneath this particular surface. Sign or no sign, rope line or open field. For the visitors who came to Yellowstone believing that missing signs meant missing danger, their vacation would become a tragedy. But before understanding how people die here, it helps to understand in detail the ground they are dying on. Beneath the Yellowstone lies a magma chamber close enough to the surface to heat groundwater far past its normal boiling point. That superheated water does not sit still. Pressure forces it upward through cracks and fissures in ancient rock toward the surface, where it erupts as geysers, bubbles slowly as mud pots, or simply pools as scalding, acidic springs in colors that look almost artificial: turquoise, rust orange, a green so vivid it looks painted on. Some of these pools reach temperatures above 200 degrees Fahrenheit. The acidity in certain features is strong enough to dissolve human tissue in a matter of minutes. Over many of these thermal areas, a mineral crust forms across the surface, a thin shell of silica-rich sinter and calcified mineral deposit that, to the untrained eye, looks exactly like solid ground. In some places, that crust is only a few inches thick. It can be visually indistinguishable from the dirt, grass, or gravel surrounding it. There's no way to look at a patch of ground like this and know, with the eyes alone, whether it will hold a person's full body weight or simply give way beneath it. Park guidance on this specific point has never been ambiguous, and it has never changed. Stay on the boardwalks. Do not cross barriers, painted lines, or posted ropes. Assume all thermal ground is unstable, even where it looks solid, even where a dozen other visitors have clearly walked across it before without incident. This guidance is printed on park maps handed out at every entrance station. It is spoken aloud by rangers at trailheads. It is posted on placards along nearly every boardwalk in the geyser basins. And still, every single year, people step past it anyway. Part of the reason signage cannot cover every hazard is structural, not bureaucratic. Thermal features migrate over time. A hot spring that was perfectly stable last season may be gone entirely this season. Its water rerouted underground, replaced by a brand new vent 20 feet away that did not exist 12 months earlier. Old ground collapses without any external warning. The landscape is, quite literally, alive in a geological sense, shifting and reforming on a timescale that has nothing to do with visitor season schedules or sign printing budgets. To mark every conceivable hazard individually would require rebuilding the entire signage system of the park every single year, chasing a threat that refuses to hold still. Federal courts, asked repeatedly over the decades to weigh in on this exact question, have consistently upheld the Park Service's discretion to balance visitor safety against the preservation of a genuine, unmanaged wilderness character, ruling in essence that the government is under no obligation to fence off an entire living ecosystem simply because large parts of it happen to be lethal. The danger, then, was never truly hidden. It was disclosed plainly, repeatedly, in guidebooks and ranger talks and post-it rules that most visitors read, absorbed, and then quietly set aside the moment the view in front of them becomes more interesting than the warning behind them. The human brain has a remarkable, almost stubborn capacity to convince itself that visible order equals actual safety. That a clean, well-maintained boardwalk stretching towards a more scenic vantage point implies that the ground just beyond the railing must be reasonably safe too. It rarely is. It is, in fact, often at its most deceptive exactly where it looks the most ordinary. What follows is not the story of a single victim, it is the shape of a decision chain that has repeated itself, with only minor variation in setting or season, across dozens of documented Yellowstone thermal incidents over the decades. The names change, the ages change, the reasons people give later for why they stepped off the path change only slightly. The chain itself does not change at all. Decision 1 is always the same, and it always feels harmless at the time. Trusting appearances. The crust looks dry. The surrounding grass looks ordinary, unremarkable, no different from grass anywhere else in the park that a person has already safely walked across that same afternoon. Other visitors are visible nearby, walking, photographing, laughing, apparently unharmed by proximity to the same feature. Nothing about the immediate scene announces danger the way danger is supposed to announce itself. There is no visible flame, no obvious edge, no dramatic plume of steam rising the way it does over the most famous geysers. The mind runs a quick, entirely unconscious calculation. If this were truly deadly, wouldn't it look deadly? And concludes wrongly that it is safe enough to approach. Decision 2 follows close behind, almost immediately, leaving the boardwalk. People step off the maintained path for reasons that sound, when spoken aloud afterward, almost embarrassingly small. A better photograph, framed without a metal railing cut in across the bottom of the shot. A more flattering angle in the afternoon light, a shortcut backdoor to parking areas that would otherwise require a longer walk around. A dropped hat, a fallen phone, a child's toy that rolled just a few feet past the edge of the walkway. A simple desire to escape a crowd of other tourists clustered shoulder to shoulder at the main viewing point. To find a quieter spot with a clearer view. None of these reasons sound reckless in the moment they're made. That is precisely what makes them dangerous. Each previous safe step, the walk from the parking lot, the hike out to the overlook, the sight of a dozen other visitors doing exactly the same thing without consequence, reinforces a quiet, false lesson. If the last 100 steps were safe, the next one probably will be too. The ground does not send updates on this point. It does not warn a person in advance that this particular step, unlike all the ones before it, will be the one that fails. Decision 3 is quieter still, more internal, and in many ways more dangerous than the other two combined. Assuming the park would warn you if it mattered. Visitors interviewed after near misses, and family members interviewed after tragedies, describe a version of the same underlying thought. There would be a sign, if this were truly deadly. They wouldn't let people walk anywhere near something that could actually kill someone. Someone surely would have put up a fence by now. This expectation is not stupidity. It is a perfectly reasonable assumption, built over a lifetime of walking through managed public spaces. Sidewalks, playgrounds, shopping centers, city parks, where genuine danger is, by design and by law, almost always clearly marked. But it directly conflicts with the actual operating philosophy of this specific park. Yellowstone has decided, deliberately and as a matter of long-standing policy, that it will not hold every visitor's hand through every hazard on 10,000 separate thermal features. The gap between what people expect a national park to provide and what this park actually provides is exactly where the fourth and final decision waits patiently for someone to walk into it. Decision 4 requires no real choice at all. It requires only physics, and physics does not ask permission. The crust, thin and untested by the particular set of footsteps, simply fails. There's no gradual sinking. There is no slow give that might allow a person to feel the ground softening beneath them and step backward in time. Investigators describe near instantaneous collapse. One moment, solid ground underfoot, the next moment, nothing at all. No warning crack spreading outward, no settling sound. Only failure, sudden and total. The instant enough weight presses down in exactly the wrong place. Once the ground gives way, there is almost nothing left to decide. What happens next happens to the body, not to the will. The physiological sequence that follows has been documented clinically and repeatedly in the aftermath of these incidents, and it is worth describing plainly without softening it, because softening it is part of how the danger gets underestimated in the first place. Body weight breaks through the thin crust in a fraction of a second. What waits beneath is not merely hot water. In many of these features, it is acidic, mineral-saturated water sitting at or very near boiling temperature. Immersion is immediate and total. Third-degree burns begin instantly across whatever portion of the body may contact. Often the legs first, sometimes the torso, sometimes in the worst documented cases, far more. Tissue destruction at this combination of temperature and acidity is catastrophic and immediate. It is not a slow burn building gradually over minutes, the kind a person might associate with a stovetop or a campfire. It is a near-instant chemical and thermal assault on skin, muscle, and underlying nerve tissue all at once. The body responds to injury of this scale the way it responds to any massive, sudden trauma. Fluid loss accelerates rapidly because damaged tissue can no longer hold moisture the way healthy tissue can. The cardiovascular system begins to fail under the strain of that fluid loss, a state clinicians refer to as hypovolemic shock. Blood pressure drops. Organs that depend on steady, reliable circulation begin to struggle almost immediately. If scalding steam or vapor is inhaled during the fall itself, or during the desperate first seconds of trying to climb out, the airway can be damaged directly, swelling shut the very passage a person needs simply to breathe. In the most severe documented cases, the combination of burn trauma, rapid fluid loss, and airway compromise cascades into multi-organ failure within a remarkably short window of time, sometimes hours, not days. Self-rescue in most of these cases is simply not a realistic option, no matter how much willpower or panic a person brings to the moment. The ground surrounding the point of collapse is, by definition, just as untested and unstable as the ground that already failed. A person struggling to pull themselves out risks breaking through again in a new spot, compounding an already catastrophic injury. The pain itself is described in the handful of survivor accounts that exist as instantly incapacitating. The kind of pain that overwhelms coordinated movement entirely, that turns a simple task like reaching for a rescuer's hand into something the body can no longer manage. And even those who witnessed the fall firsthand, standing just a few feet away on solid boardwalk, cannot simply run in after the person struggling below them. Rescuers cannot safely rush directly onto unstable thermal crust without risking becoming a second victim rather than a rescuer. And every ranger trained for this terrain knows it, even when it means standing at the edge, shouting instructions while someone a few feet away is dying. This is one of the cruelest features of a thermal accident in this particular landscape. Help can be watching in real time, fully aware of what is happening, and help can still be structurally unable to reach the person in time. Outcomes vary by severity and by how much of the body made contact with the water in that first instant. Some victims do not survive the initial injury at all. Others survive the fall itself, are extracted by rangers trained specifically for this terrain, and are flown toward advanced burn care, only to succumb hours or days later in a hospital burn unit as the full scale of internal damage becomes apparent. Burn injuries of this severity are notoriously difficult to fully assess in the first moments after they happen. The true depth of tissue damage often reveals itself only over the following day, sometimes even later, as infection sets in, as organ systems already weakened by shock begin to fail one after another. There is no single, universal ending to these stories. There is only the same beginning, over and over again, decade after decade. A boardwalk, an invisible line a few feet beyond it, and a single step taken past the line. For those still alive after the fall, survival now depends entirely on how quickly help can reach a place that was never designed by anyone to be entered. The emergency response in Yellowstone follows a sequence refined over decades of incidents like this one. Bystanders, often the very people who watched the fall happen in real time, standing just feet away, Notify rangers immediately using radios, phones, or simply running toward the nearest staffed area as fast as they can move. Yellowstone's own emergency medical services respond, trained specifically for the unique hazards of thermal terrain rather than generic wilderness injury, aware from the outset that the ground itself is part of the danger, not just the injury it caused. Where the surrounding terrain allows it, specialized extraction techniques are used to reach a victim without a second person breaking through the same unstable crust. In more severe or more remote incidents, helicopter support may be called in to move a critically injured person toward advanced burn care as quickly as possible, since the nearest facility equipped for injuries of this scale is often hours away per road. Investigations into these recurring incidents, conducted across the decades this park has operated under its current philosophy, return the same finding again and again, almost without exception. Nearly every documented case involved a visitor who had left a designated walkway or crossed a posted barrier before the ground gave way. Not most cases, nearly all of them. The pattern is so consistent across so many years and so many separate incidents that it stops looking like a series of unrelated, unfortunate accidents and starts looking like something closer to a predictable outcome of one specific, repeatable set of choices. In the aftermath of these tragedies, lawsuits have followed, filed by grieving families searching for something, anyone to hold accountable, often alleging that the park failed in its basic duty to adequately warn visitors of the danger that took someone from them. It is an entirely understandable instinct. Grief searches for negligence, for a fence that should have existed, because an unmarked patch of ground feels more like an oversight than a facto of nature. But courts, reviewing these claims again and again over the years, have generally reached the same conclusion each time. The placement, density, and exact location of warning signage across the park is a discretionary decision belonging to the National Park Service, protected precisely because the alternative, comprehensively signing every conceivable hazard across a 10,000 feature thermal landscape that reshapes itself constantly, is neither realistic nor consistent with the legal mandate to preserve wilderness character alongside public access. What changed in the years following these incidents, and what deliberately did not change, tells its own story about where the park has drawn its line. Boardwalks have been extended, reinforced, and in some cases rerouted entirely away from newly discovered unstable ground in high-traffic basins. Visitor education has expanded steadily through ranger talks delivered at trailheads, printed safety materials handed out at entrance stations, and repeated verbal warnings given directly to groups before they set out toward the most popular thermal features. Targeted signage has been added at specific locations with a documented history of prior incidents, exactly where past tragedy has already proven a real and recurring risk. What has not changed, and what the Park Service maintains publicly and consistently that it will not change, is any comprehensive policy of marking every single individual hazard across the park's entire thermal footprint. Officials continue to argue that such a policy is not merely impractical, given a landscape that reshapes itself year to year, but fundamentally at odds with what a national park is supposed to be in the first place. A place where wilderness, not bureaucratic caution, stacked sign after sign along every trail, is allowed to set the terms of the experience. The debate over how much warning is enough continues today, in park offices, in courtrooms, in the living rooms of families who will spend the rest of their lives wondering whether a single sign in one specific spot might have changed everything. But the ground itself has never cared who wins that argument. It does not read policy memos. It does not respond to lawsuits or grievance letters written to superintendents. It simply waits, thin and deceptive, patient in a way nothing human can truly understand, for the next person who mistakes silence for safety. The hardest part of these stories is how ordinary they begin. No one wakes up in the morning planning to challenge a geothermal system older than human civilization itself. They plan a vacation, a photograph, a shortcut across a patch of grass that looked no different from the grass they had already walked across a dozen times earlier that same afternoon. A closer look at a feature too strange, too beautiful to be satisfied viewing only from a distance behind a metal railing. The chain could have ended at every single step along the way. It could have ended simply by staying on the boardwalk, full stop. No exceptions, no matter how small or how tempting the shortcut looked in that particular moment. It could have ended by respecting a barrier, not because it made obvious logical sense standing there in the sunlight, but because someone with far more knowledge of the exact patch of ground had already decided a barrier needed to exist there. It could have ended by accepting a harder, less comfortable truth. that an unsigned patch of earth in a place like this can still be lethal, that the simple absence of a warning sign is not the same thing as the presence of actual safety. It could have ended by understanding clearly and in advance, before a single boot ever left the boardwalk, that a national park cannot and never once promised to mark every individual danger lying just beneath a visitor's feet. Yellowstone's silence is not permission. It was never permission, no matter how many footprints already lead off the path in any given direction. It is a reminder, repeated patiently and indifferently, year after year after decade, that wilderness does not guarantee safety simply because people are legally permitted to walk through it. The park does not owe any visitor a sign for every threat it contains. It owes access, and it owes the truth, spoken plainly at every entrance station and every trailhead. The ground here can kill you, and it will not tell you when. The people who crossed these invisible lines were not trying to become cautionary tales for a documentary. They were, almost without exception, making decisions that felt small and entirely reasonable right up until the exact moment the ground disappeared beneath them. A photograph, a better angle, a shortcut, a single unremarkable step, indistinguishable in every way from all the safe ones that came directly before it. In places where nature writes the rules instead of asking permission, the smallest choice can become the last one a person ever makes, and every step of it was preventable. If you've made it this far, consider subscribing. That's Spike's Cart Mutrero. It might be the cheapest piece of survival gear you ever pick up. Want more preventable? These stories are next. Thank you for watching.